America's war in Afghanistan is over, but the tally is still being counted. 143 billion U.S. tax dollars spent to rebuild the country. Tens of billions of that lost to waste, fraud, and abuse. Some of it returned thanks to one Inspector General.
We saved approximately $4 billion to the taxpayer.
Who made money off of all the spending?
This week, John Sopko, the man who is looking out for our wallets, leaving his position after serving under 3 presidents as the dogged Inspector General for Afghanistan reconstruction.
The first stop by America's new Secretary of State was Panama. A sign President Trump's foreign focus is playing out much closer to home.
Can I just get your initial reaction when you heard President Trump say what he did about the Panama Canal?
Well, first of all, I was surprised, amazed.
This week, we're in Panama to see why a 100-year-old canal has become a top modern issue.
When Russia invaded Ukraine, there was one impact that rocked Europe and the world.
But I'm afraid that we forgot a bit about the energy security.
What role is the U.S. playing in this whole dynamic?
I would say a huge role.
This week from Poland, how the U.S. is making a power play in energy.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Americans spent more than $143 billion tax dollars to rebuild Afghanistan as the U.S. war against Islamic extremist terrorists was waged for 20 years. Approximately 30%, or $43 billion of our money, was lost to waste, fraud, or abuse. That information was unearthed by Inspector General John Sopko, whom we've interviewed frequently on Full Measure. I recently spoke with him, planning a sort of an exit interview since he'd announced his agency was winding down early now that the U.S. is no longer spending so much in Afghanistan. After our interview, he became one of 17 inspectors general on the chopping block of the new Trump administration. A surprising move, perhaps, against a fierce auditor labeled by his detractors as the Donald Trump of IGs. Today, we look at more than 20 years of his work to save taxpayer money.
The Islamic extremist Taliban terrorists running Afghanistan harbored Osama bin Laden after the 9/11 attacks. That drew the U.S. into what became a 20-year-long war. But even as American soldiers fought in Afghanistan, American taxpayers were forced to pour billions of tax dollars into Afghanistan for reconstruction. That's where John Sopko came in, appointed in 2012 by President Obama as Special Inspector General for Afghanistan reconstruction. He unearthed billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, we indicted and convicted over 150 people for fraud, waste, or abuse. We saved approximately $4 billion to the taxpayer.
Who made money off of all the spending?
Oh, where do I start? I mean, our contractors made a heck of a lot of money. You know, they talk about the military-industrial complex. Well, there's also, I would call it the development complex. So you got people who are making tons of money working for various large contractors who usually get the contracts for reconstruction, humanitarian assistance, and all of that. They're doing it right now. They're making a ton of money. Those are basically the two big ones. And of course, a lot of Afghans who stole the money or made a profit while they were there. So everybody made money in Afghanistan.
When I recently interviewed him, Sopko had already announced an early closing of his agency this coming fall, now that the U.S. isn't spending as much in Afghanistan anymore. Our interview was shortly before he and 16 other inspectors general were fired by the new Trump administration. All recent presidents have exercised their right to replace IGs. Why Sopko? No explanation was immediately given, but his watchdog work made him powerful enemies among the U.S. agencies and contractors whose actions were sometimes exposed as fraudulent or wasteful. We covered many of those stories here on Full Measure. Anyone flying through Kabul International Airport in Afghanistan's capital city the past couple of years might have seen this odd scene, a fleet of abandoned military planes parked off to the side.
We actually asked the question, what are those airplanes? Because you would see them right next to the main air terminal in Kabul. They were all jumbled together with trees and grass growing between them.
In October of 2014, Sopco discovered the military had scrapped the airplanes and sold the leftovers to an Afghan construction company for 6 cents a pound. A $500 million investment of U.S. tax dollars whittled down to a measly $32,000. Nicknamed 64K because of its size, Congress intended it to be headquarters for the 2010 U.S. military surge of 30,000 troops to fight Taliban Islamic extremists. There was just one problem.
The Marine commander, the general in the ground running the surge, said, I don't want it, I don't need it, don't build it. And 2 other generals above him said the same thing. Don't build it. We don't need it. We already have a headquarters. It's a waste of money.
Yet the project moved forward, a facility designed to be big enough for a staff of 1,200, complete with a war room and briefing theater. But 64K never served as a surge headquarters. In fact, it was still under construction when the surge ended in 2012. Yet U.S. tax dollars continue to pour in for upgrades.
A couple of years ago in the press, you were called the Donald Trump of Inspectors General. I think that was intended as an insult. I'm not sure it would be seen as that today by everybody.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts of that? Are you the Donald Trump of the IGs?
If it's speaking truth to power, if it's being a disruptor, which I think a lot of people accuse me of being a disruptor because I was actually telling him that the emperor had no clothes, yeah, probably am.
Your office was created under President Obama, so of course you worked with Obama, and Trump under his first term, and President Biden. What did you notice?
The major difference was really with the Biden administration, because we had problems with the Biden administration on getting information from the State Department and USAID. I would have to say that they were the worst. I mean, we spent almost a year and a half trying to get information about what we were doing in Afghanistan. And we were doing it not for ourselves, we were doing it because Congress wanted that information. And it's the State Department's position was the it was the worst position I'd ever seen on sharing information with a congressionally mandated request and with an Inspector General. And so I'd have to say that.
What would you consider some of your top accomplishments?
We were one of the first government agencies to start raising concerns, serious concerns about how the war was going, because we were seeing it through the reconstruction. Because part of reconstruction, just so your audience knows, we spent $86 billion to train the Afghan military and police. So we focused on that. And we were seeing some horrible things there early on, going back to almost the year I started. We started reporting on serious concerns.
One serious concern outlined in the report Sopco did about ghost soldiers. We covered that story in 2017.
When you say ghosts, what are you referring to?
Well, we're talking about policemen, Afghan military, Afghan civil servants who don't exist, or they have multiple identity cards, and we're paying their salaries. By we, I mean the United States and the international community.
What are some of the things you learned about the inner workings of our government as you tried to expose and prosecute potential crimes and wrongdoing?
Well, what I learned is it doesn't work, and it doesn't work very well. Our procurement system is broken. And it's broken not just in Afghanistan, it's broken here in the United States. I mean, the Defense Department has been on the high-risk list for procurement and contracting as long as I've been in Washington. I mean, they can't balance their books. They can't give you an audited financial data. They've never been able to do it. We basically are not prepared, and that's the lesson we should learn from Afghanistan. If we're going to do this again, and I believe we are, is that the countries may be different, but the way we do reconstruction in a war zone is the same. It's the same lack of coordination, lack of planning. Most of the people who went to Afghanistan didn't even know why they were there. Our soldiers, aid officials, and whatever. So we really got to change that. And the other thing is, we got to require our people to speak the truth back to Congress and to the American people about what's going on, and that's a major problem we've had.
There was another IG who lost his job in the mass firings by the Trump administration, Mike Ware, the Inspector General of the Small Business Administration, who was tireless in unearthing COVID-related fraud, no matter where the trail led. For more on this story and other Full Measure reports, listen to my podcast, Full Measure After Hours, wherever you like to listen. When we come back, why the Panama Canal is a big focus of the Trump administration. Speak softly and carry a big stick. That's how President Teddy Roosevelt described his policy toward Latin America. President Trump seems to be following the big stick policy in his suggestions to take back the Panama Canal that the U.S. built under Roosevelt. The region is so important to commerce and national security. It's the first foreign trip taken by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And for that reason, we sent Scott Thuman to report on Panama's place and importance under the new Trump administration.
Even as Secretary of State Marco Rubio made Panama his first official trip, President Trump doubling down on his calls to change the way the canal does business with America, or face the possibility of real consequences.
What they've done is terrible. They violated the agreement and not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
The Trump rhetoric right out of the gate from the new administration, pointing to a focus on American interests close to home. In this case, a century-old canal, still a critical point of international trade, and now national security. The canal, a 50-mile waterway joining the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, cutting thousands of miles off shipping routes. One after another, a procession of ships cross in just 10 hours. But with limited space, it's not a cheap route, costing from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands per vessel, depending on size and cargo. All earning Panama nearly $3.5 billion in profit last fiscal year. Originally built and controlled by the United States for decades, Panama was given full control in 1999. In recent years, fees for crossing have risen.
The fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, highly unfair, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama, I say very foolishly, by the United States.
On Wednesday, the State Department said U.S. government ships will no longer be charged to use the canal, a deal the Panamanians said was not sealed. On Thursday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth agreed with Panama's president to increase joint military cooperation to protect the canal against external threats.
Can I just get your initial reaction when you heard President Trump say what he did about the Panama Canal?
Well, first of all, I was surprised, amazed.
Jorge Quijano ran the Canal Authority between 2012 and 2019.
And once the people of the United States, whom we've always had a great relationship, understand that everything that is being said is not true.
Beyond rising fees, Trump is bothered by China's growing relationship with Panama. He says another violation of the treaty, prompting debate and hearings on Capitol Hill.
We cannot stay idle while China is on the march in our hemisphere.
There's been a lot of confusion about President Trump's comments that China runs the Panama Canal. Here's the situation on the Pacific Ocean entryway side. Just across the water there is the Balboa port. That port is operated by a company that's based in Hong Kong, China. The concerns expressed by the White House are that if there were a supply chain war or a trade war with China, they could order that port to be shut down to American access in this very narrow entryway to the Panama Canal.
Or worse, use vessels to form a blockade. That perceived threat to national security raised in the president's inaugural address.
China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
What about the talk regarding China? The assertion that China somehow has control here or would have great control if it wanted to.
Where is he coming from? Because of the two ports that we have, one on the Atlantic and one on the Pacific. Most of the vessels that go to this port are not owned by Chinese, are run actually by either European countries or Japanese countries.
And by the end of the week, the engagement went all the way to the top, with President Trump and Panama's President Molino set to engage in a direct call to calm the waters over the Panama Canal. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman in Panama.
Coming up on Full Measure, wait until you hear who's profiting from Europe's energy crisis after Russia invaded Ukraine. It's not overstating to say that a country's level of success is largely dictated by its ability to produce or buy abundant, affordable energy. It impacts everything from national security to the economy. Today, we head to Europe to hear how U.S. energy companies are benefiting after the Russia-Ukraine war reset the energy dynamic in Europe.
On our visit to Poland's capital of Warsaw, we learned the country is accelerating its push to become more energy independent. Julia Wick is an expert in energy transition at Poland's largest energy company, state-owned Orlen.
To be clear, does Poland have any oil wells or natural gas of its own?
Yeah, we have some, but it's just like a tiny bit of our needs. Europe is not very wealthy in the fields, in the oil and gas fields.
Russia, on the other hand, is rich in energy, the world's second largest producer and exporter of natural gas, which is critical for heating and cooling and to generate electricity. Before Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Austria and Latvia relied on Russia for more than 80% of their gas supply. Germany was Russia's largest gas customer, then Italy. Other large importers of Russian gas in Europe included the Czech Republic, France, Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia. All told, in 2021, Russia supplied 45% of the European Union's natural gas.
How would you describe what has changed in Europe since Russia invaded Ukraine when we're talking about energy?
I think the invasion of Russia on Ukraine changed quite a lot. At first, Europe fought very much about the green transition only, because it was like a top priority to change the system to be more eco-friendly for people, to be better for the environment. But I'm afraid that we forgot a bit about the energy security as a very important issue in the whole energy system resilience. And when the invasion started, we saw the hydrocarbon supply routes being changed a lot. And the supply stopped coming from Russia. They just stopped. And we had to find alternatives.
What role is the U.S. playing in this whole dynamic?
I would say a huge role. The crisis didn't hit that much Poland when in 2022 when the war started, when the invasion started, basically. We had long-term contracts for LNG with U.S. suppliers.
LNG is liquefied natural gas delivered to Poland from the U.S. in a steady stream of ships.
It accounted for around 40% of the supply of natural gas to Poland. So it was huge, and those long-term contracts enabled us to avoid a very huge economic and security issue back then. So we were very fortunate that we thought about it and we had this reliable partner.
Still, the disruption in energy supply from Russia sent Europe into an economic crisis with shortages and skyrocketing prices. Peter Nemski has served in the Polish government in charge of energy issues.
How difficult was it to have the surprise of the cutoff of Russian energy in a fairly short period of time in this time when Russia invaded Ukraine?
It was a really economic shock because prices of gas really were very high.
He says as a result, the EU adjusted its energy priorities.
After half a year, something like that, created or provoked a series of decisions in Germany, in France, in other countries, toward diversification of these supplies.
So to state the obvious, it's a better
situation. So this is good result. This is good for Western Europe for sure. For some Central European countries as well. This aftershock, after this invasion, Russian invasion in Ukraine, created, proper result, I would say.
The big winner in the equation is the United States. In 2023, the U.S. became the largest supplier of liquefied natural gas to Europe, providing nearly half of the total imports.
We just, for a couple of years, focused more on the green transition and didn't think that much about the energy security. But then it changed, and now I think the energy security issues were elevated very, very high on the agenda of the politicians in the EU. And now it's more levelized, I would say. So that's a very positive thing.
Another bonus for U.S. companies, as part of its move toward more energy independence, U.S. Westinghouse Nuclear will build Poland's first nuclear power plant. Construction could start in 2028. After a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Coming up next week on Full Measure, we're off to Oregon to report on the nation's first-of-its-kind experiment permitting heroin and other hard drug use.
It was packaged that, it was going to provide all this treatment, and it was going to do all these wonderful things, and unfortunately, it failed to deliver on those. And at the same time, it slid in, and by the way, we're going to decriminalize all these hard drugs. And so it really was one that I think the public, felt like they were sold one thing and got something totally different.
Now a big change next week on Full Measure. Until next time, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson.